All right, welcome everybody to what is this, like the 33rd session this year that we've had of these Wednesday morning
That is correct.
discussions. Amazing. Really, this is our incubation tank, our think tank for all of our ABT ideas. So, a few little setup words here. Here's today's illustration to get everybody in the groove of where we're headed towards. Going to be talking about teaching the ABT, which is something we've had a few little podcast sessions on in the past, and it's been an evolutionary process of 10 years really. Mike Strauss is here with us. He and I kind of began the process a decade ago at USDA when he was the head of the Office of Science Quality Review there, and we began with our story circles training. Then when the pandemic hit, we shifted to the course of 10 1 hours. And now we've moved on to the mini course now with a lot of different groups. But just before I get going on today's session, a little promo for next week. Everybody put this on your schedule. So um, I got contacted just a few days ago by old buddy Justin Yeager, who was at East Carolina University and now is based in Quito. And you want to say just one or two sentences about what you do? I put a title up there. Justin, say
Sure.
hi.
So I'm an evolutionary biologist and do a wide variety of work between speciation, but also things, for example, in public health with like phage therapy and some alternative strategies for treating things like multi-resistant infections, among many, many other things. But I have a brand new student, Inti, who's here, who is working in scientific communication, particularly with a focus in reaching and being more effective in communicating with indigenous communities. So in what I mainly study is poison frogs, there's a lot of indigenous communities, for example, that have used blowguns to hunt with them, and we work with them now. But the point of this is bringing some of the more vanguard technologies to the people that are the least vanguard in some technological things so that they can benefit. And so Inti's thesis is really working around this. And he himself comes from an indigenous community high in the Andes.
And we had a chat yesterday with Charles Delahunt, head of machine learning for Global Health Labs. And then hopefully he'll be with us next week. And this will really, you two will kick off the conversation. I think yesterday you were wondering how exactly would the ABT work and what you're doing. And then once we got going talking with Charles, I think he was explaining to you exactly why the ABT is powerful and relevant. So, okay, that's enough teaser for next week's session, which will be really wonderful on indigenous voices and all that sort of stuff. So thanks, Justin. And to get going on a little setup for today, here's where this all begins was 3 years ago when I was on Eric Topol's podcast. He's a very prominent epidemiologist, and his podcast has got huge following. And so I gave a talk at Scripps Clinic in La Jolla. He was there for that and then asked me to be on the podcast. And it was February 2022, right at the thick of the pandemic. And he came up with this term. We rambled for the first 5 or 10 minutes and then got ready to talk about CDC. And then he said, "All right, let's talk about the historic botch job that has been done here with communicating COVID." And the rest of the whole thing was critique of what had gone wrong with COVID communication. It was one of those podcasts that I just did it and thought, why did that amount to anything? And then about 3 or 4 months later, we got an email from our friend Henry Blumberg, who's here with us. And he's a professor at Emory University with the medical school and was interested in the ABT. We started discussions and eventually brought it in that fall, taught it for the first time. And it's gone so well there now that we're in the fourth round of doing it. And we made a video a couple months ago about what we've done there. And it's very interesting because that video showed to one person in the law profession recently who was wanting to promote ABT. And I think it wasn't slick enough and glossy enough for him. And he said, okay, I like that. And we know that. I mean, this is zero budget. We did this video. It's almost an inner circle thing for people in this technical world of medical education or whatever. But that said, last Friday, Henry, see if you don't agree, but we did that session with your CTSA folks, this consortium of all these medical schools around the country. And in that much more inner circle setting, I thought the video really hit a bullseye. Rachel, Henry, what do you guys think? Don't you think that was the right audience for it? Maybe I should ask Rachel because she's a little more gung ho on it than Henry. Uh,
I'll defer to Henry, but yes, it was very well received by our external advisory committee. Henry, what else?
Yeah, no, thank you, Randy and Matthew, for joining our external advisory committee meeting. I think they really enjoyed hearing, what you're doing with our trainees with communications training and the ABT. So, yeah, I think
Yeah,
they thought it was a novel approach,
Yeah.
and it
for
just it mostly felt
our
like the right
students.
audience. They
Yeah,
were understanding exactly what this needed. They weren't looking for glitz and gloss the way the outer circle does a bit more. They were much more geared into the substance of what this thing was, and as a result, it really and that's what we intended in making it was just something to get across. It's a 4 minute or 3 minute video about what we've been doing there at Emory for the past 4 years. And so, as I say, we're in the fourth year running the course this fall. And so it dawned on us to, I just did a visit there about 3 weeks ago, had a wonderful time, and actually did a session in person with the course and then gave a talk for the general community there. And there's a bunch of people there that are really getting it. And so what we've ended up doing was finding three of the people that are in the course right now, asking them to come join us. And as I say, the other thing that kind of came together with that visit for the first time ever is this realization of signal to noise. That's what we're dealing with. The ABT is the tool to help you dig through all the noise to try and find the signal. And just now in this last hour session that we had, came up with this little catchphrase, which is a community of clarity. And is that still working for you, Matthew and Liz?
That's still working.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what we're doing, especially with this Florida groups, trying to build a community that's based on clarity and having some standards in terms of quality of communication. So, on that note, I will stop sharing and I'm going to hand this over to Liz, who's been working with them and especially in the working circles, and we'll talk about that. And Liz, take it away from here if you're all set.
For sure. Yeah. So yeah, as Randy said, I've been doing the working circles. Fun fact, I had one this morning. So that's why I've been switching gears. So the working circles that we have been doing with Emory, so they they're about a 30-minute session. They consist of 5 people, one host and 4 participants. The host is the person whose ABT is actually what is covered during the working circle. And we also include one structuralist. So an additional person that's in this case has been me. In the past has also been Matthew, where our job is we're the hallway monitors. We just make sure that everything stays on track and doesn't get too far into the weeds. And we're there to answer any questions. But then the working circles, as they go through the host's ABT, they have a set of questions that we've given them in the form of our scribe document that they go through that replicates our thought process, Randy's, Matthew's, and my thought process as we go through ABTs. So it helps them guide them through as they really work supportively, the participants work supportively with the host to brainstorm, ask questions, and poke and prod at the ABT to give the host more ways to work an improvement and improve the signal and really identify the signal from it. At this point, today was officially number 802 of the working circles.
Wow.
Yep. 802 in what, 5 years now, Randy?
Yes, yes, yes.
5 years. So a little over 400 hours. I think that comes to like 401 hours precisely. So when we do the working circles, though, we have 3 primary expectations that we look for out of the working circles. One is the group energy dynamic. We want to see the participants and the host working constructively together, and partly, and in a large part, the analytical nature of the ABT helps enable them to work clinically on the ABT as they go through without really any interference of personal styles. So,
and let me toss in one comment on that.
Yeah.
A lot of what we're trying to do is get away from the idea of people believing they can sit by themselves at their desk and come up with communications materials and think it's going to work. And that's something we derive from the Hollywood community. They have writers' rooms where a dozen writers work all day long together, knowing that you've got to be bouncing these things off other people. And the science world is traditionally so antisocial that there's just never been any push towards realizing that you're dealing with humans at this point with communication. So yeah, keep
Yeah.
going. It's great.
Yeah, and it's that really that group energy of the writers' room that we're looking for with them. We also like to see spontaneous use of the tools. So one, the tools we give them in class, also the ones for the working circle, and also just see that that participants and the hosts that they're asking the right questions, giving the right suggestions, and I mean more in the sense that those that help advance the process of sort of taking apart the ABT and understanding the parts and bringing in suggestions that help improve it. The last thing we really look for is the Liz moment. So I think we've all heard the Randy's story of what was about 11 years ago, Randy, that Liz Foote told you, approached you. She'd found the ABT, had put it to use in her own presentation. And when she did, she found that one, it was easier to rehearse. Her audience was more attentive to her presentation. And then after her presentation, in the days after, she saw through social media that her audience was actually regurgitating what she had told them. And not only that they were regurgitating the presentation, but they were doing so correctly. They were having dialogues about it. So, and we were talking about it recently and termed it as narrative fidelity. The presentation really went on from there. And that's pretty much how working circles are going. So I want to bring in our three students joining us from Emory. I got Jennifer, Aaron, and Kitching. Hello, hello. And you've all been in some working circles so far. Participant on, I think Kitching, we've got your working circle that you're hosting coming up this week too. So
yeah, it will be tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I was just looking at that. So did want to ask the three of you. So just wanted to know what your thoughts are on the social interactions, this group dynamic in the working circle. How has that been? Any
So
one of you?
yeah, so I've had my personal working circle and I've also participated in two already. And I realized as I was explaining my ABT to the group that was actually the first time that I think I've spoken to my outer circle. I pretty much stay within my department. So my department, I'm in pharmaceutical and biomedical sciences, and I'm studying prostate cancer and developing therapeutics for prostate cancer. And so I only talk with my department, and the conferences that I presented at are cancer-based conferences and urological-based conferences. So I've been very, very stuck in my inner circle. And so that was really the first time, besides trying to explain stuff to my parents whenever they asked me about it, that was really like my first time that I was communicating what I'm doing. And I realized I just completely kind of missed the mark on communicating to my outer circle. So that was a really valuable opportunity that I very rarely get kind of in my PhD program. So I think that was kind of my favorite part of the working
What was
circle.
that thing you told us early on about the little boilerplate thing that everybody starts their narratives with in prostate
Yeah.
cancer? Right.
So in prostate cancer, pretty much every paper starts with it's the second leading cause of cancer-related death in men worldwide. It's the most commonly diagnosed non-cutaneous cancer in men as well. And so kind of every prostate cancer paper starts with that kind of statistic problem issue. And I think particularly with the kind of DNA structure has also kind of like completely rewired my brain of how I think of presenting things, and not always starting with, oh, it's this major issue, this is why we need to study it. I think starting kind of learning about
what she means by the DNA is the dream nightmare action.
Yes, yeah.
The ABT, exactly. And that's a lot of what we've been pushing on, is to get everybody to think a little more non-literally instead of going right to the problem, to try and think, what's the dream? Where are you headed towards? And so, yeah, keep going.
But yeah, so that I have found that kind of the course as a whole has honestly just completely changed my way of thinking about communication itself. So the working circles are kind of a really good opportunity to really narrow down kind of what I've been working on the course. So I found it very valuable, and I got amazing feedback through it that I feel like has really helped.
And you came all the way over from you're the one outlier in the group. You're at
Yeah,
University
so
of Georgia.
that's why I'm driving in my car. I had class at Emory this morning and I'm driving back to Athens right now. So yeah, I'm based at UGA and I'm doing the translational science program with Emory. So I'm
Perfect.
kind of a hybrid person a little bit. So
Excellent.
Fantastic, fantastic. Erin, Kinching, any thoughts on the group dynamic too for you, or what your interactions, the social interactions in it?
It was funny that I also too had the class this morning that Jennifer was just talking about, and we were going over specific games pages and different styles that you could do them. And one of them, I think it was the first statement. It was somebody said something, then they laid out a but. And I feel like every one of us who is in the class kind of like looked at each other because our professor was like, oh, I like this. Like it introduces sort of like a narrative structure. And so I think like we all had that moment where that probably would have just like glazed over my head before. But yeah, I think I was the first like volunteer for the class to go over our working circle and the sort of questions that Randy and Matthew were prompting us with. I kind of didn't really know the answers. And it was like, even though it's my own work, it was like a little bit difficult to answer them. And then now, like, for however many weeks we've been doing the class and with the working circles, it feels more intuitive to ask these questions now. So I had done my working circle like 2 weeks ago. And then, like Jennifer, I participated in 2 others. And the last one was very like jargony and technically, and we actually had an outside person who I think I'm also a cancer biologist. The person was sort of computational biologist, and then we had someone I think from like marine science joined, and it was like really, really helpful to have a super like outside perspective because they like can really be like, but why? Or like, do you need this word? Or like, you think something's super clear because the people who read it in your field talk that way a lot. But to somebody who is just a little bit outside, it might not be as clear as you think. So having that kind of like interaction being like, is this what you're trying to say? And you're like, actually, no, that's not what I'm trying to say at all.
It definitely makes a difference when you have somebody who can come in and say, I don't get what you just said.
Right. And you're like, but it was so clear.
Suddenly reframing how you're thinking about it. So, Kitching?
Yeah, so for me, I actually will have my working circle tomorrow, but I already attend one, right, with the Mark as one. So for me, is because I never have this kind of class before. As a junior faculty, actually, for me, struggling every day is how to write a good proposal, how to have a grant, right? Then, this time, actually, for my grant, I already used the ABT format for my first paragraph for my specific aims. I feel like it will make people more understanding what I want to say, yeah, and more clear, because sometimes we assume everyone is inner circle, but actually no, like everyone is so far away. Even we are in the same building, let's say that, even the same lab, we still have the different, let's say, direction of the research we are working on. So yeah, I feel like this ABT definitely, let's say, give me another door, like open another window for me, yeah, to communicate, yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I think you've all touched on it a little bit, but I do want to ask you, how are you all feeling with the tools, especially compared to kind of when you started the course versus now? You all have some working circles under your belt, and of course, we're a good way through the course now. How are you feeling with the tools in the working circles?
I think it's like helpful to have like in a class format, like a group of people that you can practice it with who are like also learning at the same time. Cause kind of very early on in the course, we talked about sort of a lot of like the lingo and things that seemed, it was almost like a little hurdle to get over. And like I mentioned, like I couldn't really answer the questions at the beginning of class, but then when I was myself faced with an ABT that I kind of thought was a little fuzzy or unclear, like I realized why you ask those sorts of questions. And so it's been helpful to have a group of people who are like on the same page to practice these tools with, because they're also learning too and can point out, why don't you try it this way? Or this is how I see it from my perspective.
Yeah, for me, I feel like at least these two are easily to remember, like DAY, day, right? And also like ABT. It's easier to remember, then you will when you do something, you say, oh, maybe I can add this one, or maybe I can add that one. But if it's really difficult to remind yourself, then you will never use it. So I feel like it's an easy tool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would say that the tools themselves have been very helpful, but I think what was kind of the coolest part of incorporating the tools was kind of how the entire course itself was structured. And we did kind of a trial by fire of, before the class even started, we already had to write in ABT. Didn't know what anything was, and we just immediately jumped in. And when you kind of challenge yourself in that way and doing something, and you're like, great, I'm emailing these people that I haven't even met yet, my ABT, I don't even know what that is, and hopefully I kind of did something. And then as you're learning and you're going, oh, okay, and then you can kind of incorporate each individual thing as you go along. I think kind of the structure of the course, I think, has been interesting. Instead of learning the stuff and then trying to write it as you're learning, writing it first and then editing based off of the tools, and not kind of initially starting once you already have the tools. I think that I think has been really helpful to me. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we talk about with when we do our 1 week mini course where we kind of cram a whole bunch of ABT into just 1 week. We talk about participants will hit the what Matthew coined the midweek blues, where where the participants start to really feel like they don't get it. And at that point that we've taken their ABT apart in it's sort of in shreds on the floor if you wanted to put a visual element to it. But then as we help them piece it back together, they start to have, in that second half of the week, they start to really have those sort of moments of clarity, the aha moments where they go, oh, wait, this makes sense. I didn't think of it this way. This is coming together. It's not so scary now. And yes, Matthew, it's falling off the Dunning-Kruger curve. So, but it sounds like you all are sort of hitting those moments now, but I was curious if there are any particular ones that you've had as you've been going through, especially with the working circles, getting that different perspective and that group dynamic and the tools. Have any of you had those moments?
Yeah, I think something Jennifer said before, especially since I'm also in the cancer space, like we always kind of start out every grant or paper with like, this is the statistics or this is the 5-year survival rate. And it's not like necessarily starting out with a problem, but you're trying to start out with like a public health relevance. And so like getting to practice it multiple times in working circles for either like different, diseases or fields that you have different degrees of familiarity with has been helpful. And it's kind of like, retraining your brain in a way, like being able to flex your muscles, sort of. So I think I kind of liked the format of me hosting my working circle first, because then knowing, I guess, like the format helped me when I participated then ask other questions. And so it kind of is just like retraining you out of how you're used to writing and thinking about things in terms of like a manuscript or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Jennifer, Kitching, any thoughts on?
Yeah, for me in my working circle, I was one of those working circles where we basically only talked about the problem the entire time.
I remember your working circle.
Yeah. So that was really helpful for me because that's kind of not only
hang on one second
sorry.
here. Let's slow that down a little bit. What explain to everybody what that means. That all you did was talk about the problem. So there's a set procedure in the working circle of 5 questions you go through, but the first one is, what is your problem that you're working on, ideally in 5 words or less. And the rule is you can't go forward with the whole other 4 questions until you answer that one question of what is your problem. And they're welcome to eat up the entire half-hour session and never even get past that question. And that's what you're saying, Jennifer, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it helped me with my narrative structure, but also is kind of helping me kind of overall in my research and how I kind of approach it, of what is the actual problem that I'm addressing here. Since I'm in drug development, we kind of have 2 issues. We have the disease that we are trying to treat, and then we have this separate problem of trying to develop a novel strategy in order to treat this disease that already doesn't have any treatment options. So thinking of what is kind of the priority of the project, is it actually the development of the drug, or is it the disease itself, has been a really interesting question, and has kind of made me really think about all my presentations, kind of just conversational ways that I talk about my project. So thinking about the problem was, even though it was very maybe a little frustrating for my working circle to only be still on that question one, but yeah, that I think was really helpful, because it really like made me have some difficult conversations with myself and really think about what I'm focusing on basically in my entire PhD. So I thought that was helpful, not only in the course, but also just with my research as a whole.
Definitely, yeah. And you are definitely not alone in that. I think that last week I decided the theme of last week was the problem, because that was a lot of working circles running into that element of realizing there was many layers to what they were trying to do and trying to find that right one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kicheng, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, for me, I feel like the aha moment will not, let's say, for the working circle, because I will have my working circle tomorrow, right? So for me, it's one of the things I think in the class. I think you guys have a tool on your website to, let's say, count and but, right? Like that one. And when I first try to use that one to copy, just the copy paste of the specific M I wrote so far, right? And or the proposal, right? So I thought, because this proposal already a lot of people actually revision for me. So they gave me a lot of comments, let's say even two consultants, like the people to do this. So I'm pretty confident about it. But when I put information inside, I think but that the score is only 1 or 2. So I feel like, how? Like I never thought about it. Like even like professional consulting people, they went through all the information, how it can be only 1 or 2, but then I just use the word itself, the search, and I want to search my but. Yeah, definitely. You guys are right. Yes, there's no much but inside. Yeah.
It definitely, yeah, it's an eye opener where you think, I've had papers I've stuck in just past writings where I put it in thinking, oh, this sounds great, and then I put it in and go, oh.
Yeah, the chart said like you need to include the however. Yes, I did. And not too many however as well. Sorry about that.
Oh, well, fantastic. And thank you all for being here for this. This has definitely been, I've enjoyed sitting in on your working circles. Kicheng, I am looking forward to yours tomorrow too. So
Let me say a couple summary comments right now, and then we'll open it up to everybody having questions and discussion on this. But three little things that come to mind in listening right now. First off, that whole deal about the problem. And early on, we began to realize we get people in this training that are the head of $2 and $3 million projects, and we ask them, so what's the central problem at the core of your project? And they'll go off for 5 minutes about, well, we're also this, and we're also interested in this, and they're just all over the map. And that's a failure to grasp this central kind of obligation to boiling everything down to at the core, what's the one problem, and then you can structure it around there with sub ABTs, things like that. So that's the real starting point for all of this training. Second thing to say, one of our fundamental rules, old catchphrases, is the power of storytelling rests in the specifics. And this is a tremendous session right now, because this is the first time we've ever done this, brought in 3 people in the course, right in the middle of it. We're constantly saying, yeah, it's really great training. People are enthusiastic. They enjoy it. But here's the specifics of hearing the 3 of you talk specifically about what you're learning, how you're applying it, that kind of stuff. It makes it a whole lot more powerful. And then the third thing I've been talking about recently is that this has been a very innovative pathway I've been on for a long time. I left the science world. I went to this completely non-literal direction of going to the filmmaking community and film school in Hollywood, in hopes that I would find something outside the normal realm that would be different, that could be powerful. I found it with the ABT structure. I've spent 15 years developing it, getting to where it is. But it's been a long journey because the reason I left the science world, and one of the biggest reasons, is that it doesn't support innovation by design. The science world is very conservative. It's built around peer review to make sure that everything is very cautiously accumulated, and it has to be that way. But the byproduct of that is really selection against innovation. I began to realize that early on in my science career. And I've always been interested in innovation. So I knew when I did this thing, it would be a long journey of going way out in the completely different path and gaining this knowledge. But it's coming together now, and especially in just the last year or so, in a big way through this training. And the pathway towards innovation, the only hope for innovation is through individuals, never committees. And I've learned that way back in the science world. I began to realize that, wait a second, what have I gotten into in this profession? You have to write these proposals to get reviewed by committees through peer review. And committees always open up the possibility for one of the 5 or 6 committee members to just tear into something. And all it takes is that one negation. This is the power of narrative. You know, one negation can outweigh 5 positive reviews and just obliterate something. And that's how committee dynamics work against innovation. They really work towards mediocrity eventually. Individuals are the source. What's that?
I want to challenge you.
Oh, good. All right. Let's get into this.
It's
Here we
not the
go.
Here we go.
notion.
Shirley Malcolm, the veteran of the American Association of Advancement of Science. Let's hear it.
It is not the notion of peer review being the problem. It is how peer review is done as the problem. And that is that if you, in fact, surround yourself in the review with people who have a stake in the status quo, yes, that's exactly what you're going to get. But if, in fact, you open up peer review to young researchers, to diverse researchers, you're likely to get a very different outcome.
That's all very true, but let's go back to what I was saying, which is a completely different apples and oranges, which is what I'm talking about, is the profession itself, by design, and as it has to be, is geared towards slow, careful accumulation of information. And there is no way you can have both that and crazy wild innovation. Innovation has to involve all this bad ideas and things of that sort. And as a result, and one of the mechanisms used to maintain that slow accumulation of reliable knowledge is peer review. And that's how it has to be. And I realized that early on, which is, it's not that the system's wrong, it's just a strategic decision that gets made. And a byproduct of that is the selection against innovation. And I saw it from day one as a scientist, that some of the most innovative scientists I knew, when I would have long talks with them, they would pour it out about, yeah, I've done some interesting things, but it's been this bloody path of being
I
beaten
just
up.
think, no, I agree with you that in fact that the process has to be deliberate
Yeah.
and deliberative.
Yes.
But I see the research on juries, for example, and that diverse juries give you a much more honest accounting of what it is that is taking place. It's the sameness that is the killer, not the review.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's what struck me early on, was the sameness. And people began to explain to me, if you want to get your research funded, you've got to have an element of sameness to it. The reviewers have got to feel comfortable, like, oh, we were familiar with this, we know it. And that's when it began to hit me, like, I don't want to be a part of that system. I want to do new ideas. And you just can't. It's human nature. We can go on about that. We've talked about that with Marshall McLuhan. At any rate,
don't go there.
No. That's we'll go there next time. But to get back to the innovation thing, the reason I say all that is that I have survived only by single individuals getting what I'm trying to do. And every one of these places that we have flourished in, every organization, there's always the one individual. And so with the Gates Foundation, it's Steve Kern, and with the FAA, it's Steve Summer, and on and on and on. The one individual who gets it, brings it in, and then argues for it. By the way, present with us today is my old buddy, Joe Leskovich. Is Joe still here? But once upon a time, Joe, this is really wonderful.
I'm here.
There you are. Once upon a time, I made a crazy movie called Flock of Dodos.
Oh, yeah.
And Joe brought me to East Carolina University for a screening that Justin was present for. And I will never forget the day that I showed up there and he took me to lunch. And he said, like, I had asked for a screening fee, and everybody in his department was like, we're not going to give that kind of money. He said, no, trust me, this is a good film. And then he had booked the whole student union theater that night, and he and I go to lunch, and he's sitting there terrified, saying, all my credibility is at stake tonight.
It was. I didn't know if it would be a flop and there'd be 5 people that show up for it, and I had asked for all this money, and it turned out it was standing room only, and it was a huge success.
And the next day, there were 2 articles in the student newspaper, one of which was just the description of the event. The other was this editorial about who knew we had students with brains here on this campus. The post-screening discussion went on for an hour and a half, and it was so good that, yeah, that was probably the best screening.
And my dean loved it, and I got tenure, and now I'm a distinguished professor. So thanks, Randy.
There you go. You owe it all to dodos. At any rate, that is the dynamic. And so to circle back, what that's all about is Henry, who's here with us, is the guy who went out on a limb and brought the course in the beginning. And one of the cool things that happened at the end of that first year that Liz, you were telling me this has kind of been reiterated, which was they do evaluations there of the course. And one of them wrote in the evaluation, like, these people teaching this ABT thing are just different. They don't look like any of our faculty members here at the medical school. And that's very cool because we can tell they come from the real world. They're not from inside our medical tower here, yada, yada. And then Liz, what were you just telling me about that for this year's group? The same sort of sentiments like that?
I believe so. Yeah. It's been fascinating just to see the dynamic of, when Outer Circle is in there, it brings in a totally different perspective, especially on the working circles. So we've had a few working circles that have been a lot of Outer Circle, and though the dynamic and change of that is fascinating because it really is. It's kind of like watching independent groups from like an animal in like, and I said it just it's like seeing in the like kind of in like among animals when you have suddenly like a different group coming in and you're like, oh, this is interesting. And I don't mean to like reduce it down to that, but it's still from a people science standpoint, I sit there and I'm going, oh, this is interesting.
And you know what? Mike Strauss, you want to jump in for 1 minute? 10 years ago, when we first started story circles at USDA, you were particularly interested in people with English as a second language. And maybe you want to ask a question or two of Kacheng here about, the challenges. Mike, you there?
Yeah. Thank you. And I think we had some in USDA who were excellent researchers, but didn't communicate or comfortably in English. First is the simple one of is there a challenge? Did you experience a challenge when you came to this because of the language barrier?
Definitely, yes. Because I got my PhD actually outside US system, right? So I never had this kind of the class and I don't know the culture. But when I come to USA, I feel like, okay, if I'm here, I need to play this game. So I need to know how to play this game. So I just, and also the KL2 actually is the first grant I have. So thank you, Henry. Yeah. So I submit actually a lot of grants like K9L or like K22, like a lot of the K award. But for me, I feel like sometimes I think I presented well, but actually maybe not. So that's the reason I feel like ABT is really helping me to understand, oh, maybe you can do this part better and people can more understand you. And when you tell something, and especially for the speaking, I feel like compared to writing, because writing is I can revise it again and again. But like for me now, when you ask me, I just give you my first, let's say, reaction, what I thought, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
let me toss in one little tidbit there that comes to mind. Once upon a time, I visited one university that will go unnamed, and they were so excited about me coming there in communication because they had this one faculty member that was the most brilliant communicator ever, in their opinion. And he was their frog guy. And he worked on all this frog mating behavior out in the forest or whatever. And they took me that first morning and plopped me down in his office and left me for an hour with the frog man as he told me all his frog quote stories. But all they were was just and, and this frog does this and this frog does, oh, and it's crazy, this frog. And the thing they thought was so amazing was he was so enthusiastic. And yeah, he was enthusiastic, but it was still after a while just an hour of and stuff, of which I began thinking, why do I want to hear all these frog stories? I have no interest in frogs, and you haven't made that point to me. And that's where knowing how to craft this into an initial starting point, that, it's more in the logic that you hook people in. And enthusiasm is a great add-on if you've got some good logic going, but enthusiasm by itself just doesn't work. And I think that with the language barrier, sometimes if you're able to just have your logic down, so you begin with a good question, automatically you've already got people hooked in, I think. Yeah, keep going, Mike.
Yeah, that's the direction I was thinking, that I saw people give talks and have somebody walk away going, well, I just don't understand what they were talking about. They have too thick an accent and I can't understand it. When it really is that they were confusing the thing, or giving it as an and it was hard to figure out what you were asking. They were asking the hearer to both follow their language and follow something that wasn't really a narrative. So I think this helps in terms of being very clear.
Well, and on that very problem, I think that's where the simplicity element comes in as a part of the solution, which is that, granted, the person's got a very thick accent that's hard to follow. The only hope for that is to have a small amount of information presented very slowly and clearly. Because if the person gets going really fast with a whole bunch of stuff and the accent is hard to follow, then you're totally lost. But if you've managed to use the ABT to boil your whole complicated thing down into the core simple question that you begin with, you've got everybody already. And that's the mark of really good communication, is much fewer words carefully chosen, as opposed to just packing a bunch of noise in.
When
Can
I
I
speak
interject
to
here?
international
Yeah.
audiences, I slow it way down.
Yeah. Same thing, exactly. So who was that one to interject?
That was here. Yeah, I was gonna,
Charles.
to that point, one of the great things that ABT does, and I heard it in Aaron and Jennifer, is that it? And Kacheng's comments about the working circle. Fundamentally, you learn it's not about me, it's about the audience. And just grasping that core point is enormously important.
Yeah, I think that's, Charles, I think that's vitally important. And one of the questions, if I can deviate a little bit from where Randy was going, I want to know, how does learning this help you in terms of your ability to take criticism of your writing?
Good one.
Exactly, good one. Uh-oh. Yeah, let's hear from the three participants. Any thoughts? Let's see.
I would say any criticism that I've received has been so kind of like fundamentally correct that I am someone who, like, I do tend to take things a little personally. And whenever I've received any sort of criticism in this course, it's been so on the nose and helpful that I haven't even kind of like had any sort of reaction. It's been more of like a duh moment of being like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're totally right. I can completely see. It's structured in such a logical way that anytime I've received any sort of like help or criticism or anything like that, it's been so helpful that it hasn't even really been like a
a key
problem
word
kind
I
of.
think you're reaching for there is analytical.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that it's given with a clear analytical explanation.
Yes, yeah.
And a part of where this all came from was the insanity of years ago of me coming out and trying to work with these people in the filmmaking world, where you write a whole script and you give it to them and they give it back, and their critique is, it just didn't grab us. And you're like, well, how did it not grab? I don't know. It just didn't have that thing. Well, what is that thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it drove me
Yeah.
crazy. Like, that it doesn't work to give that kind of feedback. You're
Yeah.
left with nothing. And the ABT, when I began to hear those elements, like, there it is, there's the analytical model to help you really do that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it
think-
hasn't even been a frustrating process at all. It's only been helpful to me. So that's been really cool.
Randy, I think of the one time, and I can only think of one time and all the times we did the narrative course, that you started working with somebody in front of the course and they took affront to the fact that you were daring to change these excellent words that they had written and basically almost logged off. But I don't know if you remember that one.
Well, I have to say which one. We've had a few of those. But yeah, no, we had one, well, let's see, without naming the institute, exactly, of a scientist who said, well, that's just not the way I communicate my stuff. I want all the facts to be in there. And then we tried to explain, well, it just doesn't work. And at that point, there's a cultural divide that you're past. Others, the other two thoughts on that?
Maybe don't take it personally, like just put your emotional out of your logical, I feel like. Because I think everyone is kind. Sorry for that. But I feel like everyone have a good heart. No matter how they want to help you is in a good way. Just consider this. So don't take it personally. Yeah.
Well, okay, but that's a very good point there, because actually that little catchphrase isn't enough. Because you can say that to somebody, don't take it personally, they're still going to take it personally. But the difference is if you actually are giving it in this sort of inert, dispassionate, disconnected, clinical, analytical way, which is the reason this part of your thing is dragging, is because we've lost the narrative, we've lost the source of contradiction. And analytically, we need to put some more contradiction into that segment right there. That's the key thing, is to get people thinking more like a doctor, basically, of giving, doctor doesn't tell you, I just got a bad feeling you're not healthy. That doesn't quite work. You kind of need the doctor to give you a mechanistic explanation.
I'd add to Cheng's point is absolutely right, that wrapping that whole thing in a spirit of kindness as opposed to shredding makes it all work better. And the working circles are groups of peers. It's usually a cohort going through the training together, and they're in each other's groups. And I think that adds to that. We're all on the same team here spirit that makes it flow better.
There's something too, I know, Randy, we've talked about this too, of the nature that the working circles is everybody has some familiarity with the structure. So even if you're not familiar with the topic, everybody coming in is invested in improving that ABT, that narrative structure in it. And so it's become, I've got even in our notes from when we were talking earlier this week about how, we're looking at an analytical structure through a clinical lens.
Yeah, exactly. Matthew, we got any questions there in the chat that anybody wants to chime in?
See no questions. Albie, though, I'm curious, from your outer circle perspective, how have you found applying the ABT to the various inner circle people that you work with?
It's been very well received overall. The interesting thing will be, to Randy's point earlier, of will they actually commit to doing it all the way through, because at the end result seems so different, right, than what they're used to submitting. So there's a question of which we've had, my husband made a poster thing for students. It was much better targeted to students, but faculty basically, said, that's not how a poster is made. So there's a question of what happens even if you do this, when you get the pushback of this isn't what it normally looks like. What I'm hoping is that, they get the grants. So it's more successful. And the feedback is, this was so much better than the other things we've seen. But overall, the first reception is very good, and they definitely understand it. You guys were so gracious to do some workshops. So I know the faculty that worked with you absolutely, adored it, and they've been trying to go back and do it. But I think that's, feels like, that analytical thing of does it actually work? And when you get that pushback because it's different, are we all going to go back to the same thing, or are we going to come back? But the reception of the first, at the front of going, oh, I get it, is cool. And the other comment I was making in the chat is that this window right now, where everything seems so research, anti-expertise, and there's less federal funding, there is a window that I'm able to get to our faculty to say, listen, it's more competitive. You guys don't want federal funding, you want a foundation. A foundation doesn't want academic data, right? A foundation's going to want that feel good narrative of what you're doing. So I'm trying to kind of capitalize on this whole the atmosphere around us is so different now that faculty may not have a choice where they could say we just do it this way. I'm like, but the world just shifted on you, and it might, that way is not going to work anymore. So that's kind of a little fingers crossed that that's also an extra push.
Okay, and that hits on a really interesting point. Let's hear from the three folks in the course again on this point, which is the idea we've dealt with this from the beginning is the one and done mentality, and so many overly busy people want to do their communication training in one afternoon and be done with it. And and literally there are workshops that advertise themselves in 3 hours. We will teach you storytelling. And I ended up at a meeting with a group of people talking about they did that at their institute, and now they've got the story thing down verbatim. They said to me, and I said, gee, that's funny because I've been at this stuff for over 30 years and I'm still not very good at it, but somehow you guys got it down in 3 hours. Can the three participants in the course right now say a few comments about what's going on over time? Your first, as you said, that first session with the first ABT, like what in the world is this? And then the progression with time. Any of the three of you want to add some more on that? Aaron, haven't heard from you, but the
Yeah,
change
I
in
think
time. Yeah.
the first one was very much like take a couple minutes, don't spend a lot of time on it. And then I think for the first 2 or 3 weeks, we had like structured things like expand on the ordinary world part of it. And then this last one was probably the toughest one for me because Matthew had written out a bunch of different things that like we could try on and workshop. And for me, I was between, I think he gave 4 options and I was between like 3 of them because I could see like the benefit of all of them. But it's been nice to kind of do it in a stepwise fashion and like focus on one part of it. Because you do see that it does evolve over time. I feel like most people are like, oops, the deadline's coming up. Let me like quickly do this. And sure, you may get it on paper, but it might not be clear or something along those lines. And so the fact that it's been almost like 8 weeks that we've been working on technically this one statement and seeing how much it can evolve and change, I think has been really interesting.
And you're feeling like
parts.
week after week, you're getting a better grasp on it. And yeah,
like
the time element's crucial. Yeah.
The questions I think I was asked in the beginning, I very much wasn't. I was kind of taken aback by them, whereas like now I find myself asking those questions if I'm looking at someone else's ABT or looking at mine and saying like, am I summarizing the correct problem?
Yeah. Okay, we're at the 5-minute warning. Andy, yeah.
Hi, I just wanted to chime in with regard to the observations about is enthusiasm helpful or not? I started my career in media training, which was an intentionally superficial focus on form or just how one looked, for example, in television interviews. And over time, my frustrations with that line of work has brought me to the following conclusions. Enthusiasm is necessary but not sufficient. Enthusiasm is the name of the game in what McLuhan would call a hot medium, such as TV. That's why my former firm focused entirely in our instruction on body, face, and voice, based on the old communication studies by Dr. Albert Moravian out at UCLA. But over time, if all you've got is enthusiasm and there is no traceable content string, then the effect of enthusiasm backfires. Then the audience concludes this person is only enthusiastic, not at all substantive, and each subsequent gesticulation or big gesture becomes annoying and distracting. So I think it really depends. Enthusiasm is necessary, but not sufficient. And its primacy, how important it is, depends mainly on your time frame and whether you're working in a hot medium like TV, or in your case, Brandy, what McLuhan would call a cold medium, which is face-to-face communication.
Interesting. And ergo, the frog guy, that enthusiasm only got him so far with me. One last little dimension here I want to dive into in the last 5 minutes. Joe Leskovich, you guys did the ECU. You had a group of 25 or so that we did the 10 1 hour. session of the course. This group right now from the medical school, these three participants, you can see they're in a very practical setting where they're putting the ABT to use immediately with the work that they're doing. And it's very, very kind of urgent and applicable. The group that we did with you guys at ECU, probably 25 to 30 faculty, academics in general, we've run into an awful lot of them just don't have this urgency and application in the immediate practical world. And as a result, it doesn't seem to stick. I mean, we've been through an evolutionary process for 10 years now. We're being selected in different directions. And the direction we've really been pulled into is a lot of public health work and a lot of global health. Joe, you want to say just a couple words about how it went there when we did the course, and was there any
Sure.
lasting impact?
Yeah, it's still having an impact. And I know certain faculty have adopted it in their teaching, actually, of our PhD students in our integrated coastal sciences program. So it's had an impact on my career, as you talked about the screenings we did, but then the ABT workshops we did. I just used a slide this morning, where I had written it a couple of years about seagrasses and how important they are, and sequestration of carbon and habitat for animals and food webs. But we're losing all of the SAV area. There's a decline globally. So therefore, we have to do something to improve, our seagrass ecosystems, restore them, and bring back these ecosystem services. It was a very targeted slide. I used it this morning, and now I'll see how the students do on their posts about it later this week. But we're using it in our classes. We're using it in our grant proposal. I got to do a seminar tomorrow in biology about my research. I got to write an ABT tonight. I need to get a working group together real quick. Anybody want to join me? I'll help. I'll put up a Zoom meeting where we can meet. But anyhow, and also check out about reviewer number 2 and the Nobel Prize award to Peter Ratcliffe this week. He was rejected from Nature by this one reviewer who just didn't understand the significance of what he'd done. It's the same work that won the Nobel Prize, but Nature rejected it because of reviewer 2, who was obviously in the outer group and didn't get it.
Amazing. And so literally you're going to put a link into the chat window right now for
I put it up there. It's up there a ways. It's all over the news because he published his rejection letter, and you could read what they He won the Nobel Prize 27 years later after it was rejected by, because he probably didn't frame it in a way that would have included that one reviewer's thinking.
Anybody and everybody in this session right now, take advantage and show up at his group there, because everybody's valuable. The more outer circle you are.
You want me to post my group? Okay. Yeah.
If you want to share with these folks, because they've all listened to quite a bit of ABT. Let's wrap this up in the next minute or two. It's been a tremendous session as anticipated. Everybody realize next week is going to be equally amazing as we dive into ABT in indigenous cultures. And let's see, Liz, you want to give us a final wrap-up summary here of our thoughts?
Well, I would say one, if we've sold you on working circles, I will be sending out an email this week. We still have space for these last week of working circles for folks to sign up, and these outer circle perspectives bring so much to these working circles. And what I'm seeing also within this round of working circles is it's exciting. It's exciting, really, because it's seeing the group dynamic and the tools and those aha moments all coming together. And really, to our 3 who joined us today, Erin, Kitching, and Jennifer, it's been an absolute delight to watch the evolution of your ABTs in the working circles, and even the evolution of the ABTs in the working circles that you've been participating in as well. So I'm looking forward to Kitching's working circle tomorrow.
Yeehaw. And one last time, thanks again, Henry, for being the pioneer that brought us in there. And you went out on a limb, just as Joe did with my Dodos movie years ago. All these folks, I'm not able to make any progress anywhere unless I have these sorts of individuals that get the vision and take the chance themselves, and then hopefully they get the payoff 4 years later. So huge thanks for that. All right. Thanks to everybody in this group. Thanks to the 3 participants for joining us. And everybody's welcome to come back next week, same time and same
Randy,
channel. Yes, surely.
You should tell the young man who is getting ready to go into his proposal defense.
Inti.
NT, break a leg.
Definitely. Good luck to you, NT, and we'll see you next week because he'll be one of our spotlight guests for next week's session.
I just posted my link for it's a WebEx meeting at 4 o'clock my time, East Coast.
Perfecto.
All right.
Cool. All right.
Thanks everybody. It was fun.
See you next week.
Thank you so much, you three from Emory.